The rebuild has entered a phase nobody expected, and the stakes have quietly changed. What began as a daring repair of a blacklisted hypercar is now turning into something far more controversial. Because as a Bugatti Chiron sits split in half inside a Miami workshop, Matt Armstrong has uncovered something that doesn't just affect this car. It raises questions about what the manufacturer may have known all along. The teardown is complete. The impossible step, separating a Bugatti Chiron outside the factory, has already been done. And now, with the car fully exposed, the focus shifts from proving it could be dismantled to proving it can be rebuilt better than before. But during this transition, something unexpected appeared. A cracked piece of cast aluminum, a gearbox mounting bracket buried deep between the engine and transmission, a part no one would normally inspect after a front-end crash. And yet, it had already been identified. Not by Matt, not by the independent workshop, but by Bugatti themselves during the original inspection. That's where the story begins to change. Because in a front-end accident, the logical areas to inspect are obvious: radiators, structure, suspension, front crash components. But this bracket sits at the rear, hidden behind undertrays and buried within the drivetrain. Accessing it requires effort, removing protective panels, digging deeper than necessary. So the question formed naturally: how did they know to look there? Matt didn't rush to conclusions. He simply pointed out the sequence. The car went to Bugatti for inspection. They identified this deeply hidden bracket. And now, standing in the workshop, with a cracked component visible, the possibility became difficult to ignore. Maybe this wasn't random. Maybe this part was known to fail. If that's true, it changes everything. Because a known failure point isn't a weakness, it's often intentional. Engineers design sacrificial components to absorb crash energy, parts that break in controlled ways to protect more expensive systems. The bracket could have done exactly that, failing to prevent damage spreading into the transmission. If so, that's smart engineering. But it leads to a second question. If the failure is predictable and repairable, why was the car written off? Why refuse to supply the replacement part? Why insist the car return to France? These questions hung quietly in the workshop as the rebuild continued. Matt didn't stop. Instead, he moved forward with something even more ambitious, improving component rather than replacing it. The broken bracket was scanned using 3D technology, not to replicate it exactly, but to study it. The original was cast aluminum. Casting requires uniform wall thickness. It limits where material can be added. It forces compromises in design. The replacement wouldn't have those limitations. CNC machining allows material to be placed precisely where stress demands it, stronger in critical areas, lighter where strength isn't needed. The result, a component engineered beyond constraints of mass production, not just repaired, improved. While that part moved into fabrication, other upgrades quietly began shaping the project into something unique. FXLXG wanted the Chiron to sound the way a 16-cylinder engine should. The factory exhaust, designed for regulations and refinement, softened the character. Matt removed the entire titanium assembly. Rear subframe dropped. Wiring disconnected. Bolts removed carefully until the massive system lifted free. The exhaust headed to Valvetronic for custom fabrication. Not a crude straight pipe, a properly engineered system retaining primary catalyst but freeing the sound from unnecessary restriction. The goal wasn't noise. It was authenticity. At the same time, custom wheels were being designed using 3D scanning. The enormous brake calipers leave almost no margin for error. Each measurement mattered. Precision ensured the new wheels would fit perfectly without compromise. Radiators damaged in the crash were shipped for repair. What seemed like specialized components turned out to be standard high-performance units that skilled specialists could rebuild. Another reminder that not everything required factory replacement. The project evolved from repair to transformation, and with each fabricated part, the narrative shifted further. This wasn't just rebuilding a Bugatti. It was challenging the idea that only the manufacturer could control its future. Matt's confidence grew. Quietly, he began considering something unexpected, buying the car himself once finished, selling part of his collection, owning the result. That decision spoke louder than any statement. Because you don't invest in something you don't trust. The workshop lights reflected off the split chassis, now surrounded by fabricated solutions and engineered improvements. The Chiron no longer looked like a write-off. It looked like a machine mid-reinvention. And the deeper truth began to emerge. Maybe the car was never beyond repair. Maybe the failure was known. Maybe the story of impossibility was simply easier to maintain. But in the chassis, one sealed together inside one of the most exclusive hypercars ever produced, now sat exposed. Wiring harnesses traced across open carbon structures. Cooling lines, suspension mounts, and drivetrain components revealed themselves in a way rarely seen outside the factory. It was no longer a mysterious black box. It was a machine, complex but understandable, damaged but repairable. And that's when the attention shifted from spectacle to detail. Because once you can see everything, you start noticing things that weren't supposed to be obvious. The gearbox mounting bracket didn't look catastrophic. It wasn't shattered into fragments. It wasn't twisted beyond recognition. It was cracked, cleanly, deliberately, almost as if it had done exactly what it was meant to do. A sacrificial point, absorbing stress before it traveled deeper into the drivetrain. That observation alone reframed the crash. Instead of uncontrolled damage spreading through the car, it suggested controlled failure. Energy moving through the structure, reaching a designated weak point, and stopping there. It was engineering doing its job. But the more Matt looked at it, the more the earlier inspection came back into focus. Bugatti had found this component. They had removed undertrays to access it. They had checked something hidden from normal view. That kind of inspection doesn't happen randomly. It implies familiarity. It implies experience. It implies knowledge. And that's what quietly elevated this rebuild from technical challenge to investigative story. Because if the manufacturer already understood this failure mode, then the consequences of that knowledge become important. A known failure point is predictable. A predictable failure point is diagnosable. And a diagnosable issue is, by definition, repairable. Yet the car had been written off. That contradiction lingered in the background while the workshop continued moving forward. The new bracket design began taking shape digitally. Engineers analyzed stress paths. Reinforcement areas were adjusted. Corners softened to reduce concentration. Material redistributed. The final CAD model looked familiar but subtly improved, stronger without adding unnecessary weight. Meanwhile, the rest of the car continued its transformation. The removed exhaust system left a massive open space at the rear. Without the bulky titanium assembly, the scale of the W16 engine became even more apparent. 16 cylinders arranged tightly, surrounded by turbo plumbing and heat shielding. It looked less like a road car engine and more like something pulled from an engineering lab. The custom exhaust design would give that engine a voice matching its complexity. Not harsh, not exaggerated, but authentic. The kind of sound that reflects mechanical precision rather than marketing restraint. Elsewhere in the workshop, scanning equipment moved around the hubs. The new wheels weren't just about appearance. They needed to clear carbon ceramic brakes that could stop the car from extreme speeds. Every millimeter mattered. The digital model ensured no surprises later. Back in the UK, the radiators were being assessed. Bent fins, small punctures, damaged mounting tabs, nothing outside the capabilities of skilled fabrication. One by one, solutions emerged. New end tanks, rear-line cores, reinforced mounts. The cooling system would return not just functional, but reliable. What made the entire process remarkable wasn't any single repair. It was the independence of every solution. No factory support, no exclusive parts pipeline, just engineering knowledge, fabrication skill, and persistence. And with each solved problem, the idea that the car was unrepairable felt less convincing. Matt's tone reflected that shift. There was no longer urgency, no dramatic emphasis. Just calm progress. The kind of confidence that comes from understanding the machine fully. The fear of hidden damage had disappeared. Everything left was visible, measurable, solvable. The rebuild had become methodical. Parts moved between continents. Suitcases filled with components traveled from Miami to the UK and back. It wasn't glamorous, but it worked. Every journey represented another step forward. And quietly, another thought emerged. Ownership. The idea of keeping the car wasn't impulsive. It grew naturally as the project evolved. After dismantling it, studying it, improving it, the fabricated gearbox bracket arrives as a block of precision-machined aluminum. Its surface is clean and purposeful. Compared to the original cast piece, it looks almost architectural. Reinforcements appear exactly where loads concentrate. Transitions between sections are smoother, eliminating stress points. It's not flashy, but it represents something significant: independence in engineering. Holding the new part next to the cracked original tells a silent story. One was designed under manufacturing constraints, optimized for volume production. The other was designed purely for performance and strength. The difference isn't dramatic at first glance, but the philosophy behind it is completely different, and that difference symbolizes the entire rebuild. Installation begins carefully. Alignment is checked repeatedly. Torque values are followed precisely. There is no room for improvisation at this level. Every bolt must seat perfectly. Every surface must meet flush. When the bracket finally settles into place, it's more than just a repair. It's a statement that the drivetrain's foundation is now stronger than before. Elsewhere, the exhaust returns from fabrication. The new system mirrors the original routing but with subtle changes. Fewer restrictions, cleaner flow paths, precision welds that reflect craftsmanship. When fitted loosely in position, even before final installation, it's clear this car will sound different. Not louder for attention, louder in character. Cooling components begin returning as well. Repaired radiators look nearly new, their cores straightened, mounting points reinforced. Hoses are test-fitted, brackets align. Slowly, the network that keeps the W16 at stable temperature begins to reform. Each connection reduces uncertainty. Each completed subsystem brings a car closer to life. The custom wheels arrive digitally first, rendered models showing aggressive but precise fitment. The brake calipers, enormous in scale, leave only minimal clearance. The scanning process paid off. Everything lines up. Once manufactured, these wheels will not just change the look, but reinforce the uniqueness of this rebuild. Throughout the workshop, there's a quiet realization. None of these steps required factory intervention. No secret tools. No restricted processes. Just skill, patience, and careful engineering. The myth of impulsibility continues to fade. As assembly progresses, the Chiron begins to resemble a car again. The split chassis slowly reconnects. Structural elements are refitted. Lines and wiring return to their paths. What was once two halves begins moving toward one complete machine. The transformation is subtle but powerful. Matt moves around the car with growing certainty. The earlier hesitation is gone. Every solved challenge builds momentum. Confidence replaces speculation. This is no longer an experiment. It's a rebuild heading toward completion. And yet, the larger implication remains in the background. If a car declared beyond saving can be rebuilt this way, what does that mean for others? For the idea that certain vehicles must return to the manufacturer? For the belief that exclusivity equals dependency? The answers aren't spoken, but they are evident in the process itself. The rebuilt bracket supports the drivetrain. The new exhaust waits to amplify the engine's voice. Repaired cooling systems stand ready to handle heat. Custom wheels promise perfect fitment. Every piece represents a solution created outside traditional control. The workshop grows quieter as evening approaches again. The Chiron, once dismantled and uncertain, now stands partially reassembled. Stronger in key areas, customized in others, and closer to running than anyone imagined at the beginning. This isn't just a rebuild anymore. It's a demonstration. A demonstration that engineering knowledge can travel beyond factory walls. That determination can rival exclusivity. That a machine, no matter how complex, can be understood by those willing to take it apart and put it back together again. Soon, the final stages will begin. Fluids, electrical checks, system tests, and eventually, the moment everything has been building toward, ignition. When that moment comes, the sound that fills the workshop will carry more meaning than horsepower. It will represent months of persistence, countless decisions, fabricated solutions, and a narrative rewritten from impossible to inevitable. The rebuild continues. Momentum builds in a way that's almost quiet, almost understated, but impossible to ignore. With each subsystem returning to the chassis, the Bugatti shifts from a dismantled engineering puzzle into something recognizable again. The exposed carbon tub that once looked skeletal now starts to gain purpose as components reconnect. Lines find their original paths. Mounts accept bolts that haven't been tightened in months. The car is no longer paused in time. It's moving forward. Attention turns to alignment. When a car has been split, repaired, and reassembled, precision becomes everything. Even the smallest deviation could affect drivability at the extreme speeds this machine was designed for. Measurements are taken repeatedly. Mounting points are checked. Suspension geometry is carefully reviewed. This isn't just about making it run. It's about ensuring it performs as intended, without compromise. The rear subframe slides back into position. It's a moment that carries symbolic weight. Earlier, this same structure had been removed to access buried components. Now, its return marks progress toward completion. Bolts are threaded carefully. Torque wrenches click in measured rhythm. Each connection restores structural integrity. Electrical systems follow. Harnesses are routed with patience. Connectors are inspected, cleaned, and reattached. Modern hypercars rely heavily on electronics, and the Chiron is no exception. Every sensor, every control module, every communication line must function perfectly. One misconnection could halt everything. So the work proceeds slowly, methodically. The cooling system begins to take shape again. Radiators slot into place. Hoses connect, clamps secure. The network that will regulate temperatures across the massive W16 engine reforms piece by piece. It's not dramatic work, but it's essential. Without proper cooling, none of the performance matters. The custom exhaust is test-fitted. Even before final tightening, its presence changes the rear profile. The lines look cleaner, less restrictive. The idea of the engine finally breathing freely feels closer. When fully installed, this system will not only alter the sound, but subtly shift the personality of the car. Meanwhile, the CNC machine bracket sits firmly in place, almost hidden once other components surround it. It's no longer the center of attention visually, but its significance remains. It represents a turning point, the moment the rebuild transition from